Hello, everybody. We are looking at a tornado warning right now. This is going on in Mississippi, and there's a lot of storms that are going to continue forming throughout the day. I'll get into exactly how, why, and where in just a moment after I show exactly where this specific tornado warning is. To be clear, this is a radar indicated tornado warning, not necessarily on the ground yet, going toward Europa. I've been watching some storm chasers, including Tornado Tackler, who is on lives. He was in this area. It started out by Yazoo and now is by Lexington, heading in the direction of Europa, Mississippi. As we go through the day today, there's going to be more and more storms forming. I'll show you the satellite after looking at how much lightning is there. We have had a lot of space weather lately. I am getting my space weather degree. So it's solar flares, solar storms that end up sending particles from the sun. And if they are directed toward Earth, and they can penetrate our atmosphere. In the upper ionosphere, there's areas that can get ionized from that sort of reaction. It'll be all the chemicals on the periodic table when it's the solar storm coming in, and then just light, the light rays with the solar flares, and even that can send particles that charge the air and create more lightning for what's been discovered to last about 44 days. So a month and a half, and there's been a ton this month. So now switching over to satellite, you'll notice there's not a lot of thick cloud cover. And so that means that this area here is going to be even more at risk for extra tornadoes today. This is the visible now. So there's been a lot of moisture drawing in. You'll see how quick it's moving as I play it out. So it's these storms that, where you see the white tops, it's getting taller and taller. Now, as these near Biloxi and even Crestview, as the frontal, let's say the cold front here, starts moving more eastward, it will converge with this air here. So where the ground is getting sunlight, it's creating extra instability in the atmosphere. The warm ground is going to get hot from the sun, and then warm air rises. And when air rises in a moist environment like this, it easily condenses. So that's going to add fuel to the fire here with the tornado outbreak that is underway today. So here, next I'll go to the winds and show you the convergence zones and where this is coming in at. So not only do we have this low level convergence where air is coming together, once it's hitting each other, then it gets pushed upward. And then as we go up, if we have wind shear, we see that it's stronger velocity here, a stronger, faster moving air. Then we see that the air is actually changing direction a little bit. So those are two different types of wind shear. We have low level convergence right on top of upper level divergence, where these wind particles are starting to go away from one another. So not only is the air getting pushed upward, but at the higher atmospheric layer, it is actually opening up and accepting that air. And that's another driver for this. Even the fact that right now Mississippi and Alabama are at what we call the right exit region, and it's approaching. The right exit region is a little more specifically usually the end of this jet right here. So as the day goes on and this right exit region of the jet starts to move closer to Alabama, we will have an even greater risk for more tornadoes. The ground will be warmer, and I guess I'll go down slowly, show you there's still wind shear. Other right exit region even lower. So this is a very strong jet when it's white all the way into that level right there. And then at the ground level, again, at that time, we'll have the low level convergence, that frontal zone, a little bit toward the east. So I believe this bigger threat is going to be in the area here between Mississippi and Alabama in the next, let's say, 5 to 6 hours before sunset. It's extremely hot there, and that's another one of these ingredients for these storms. We need some hot air at the surface. These are 70-degree temperatures and high 60s. And when it clashes with the dry, cold air, that creates a very strong frontal zone. So this is just a huge recipe for extreme amounts of tornadoes, which is why the Storm Prediction Center went ahead and did an enhanced risk here today instead of what they were doing before with the slight risk. I would not be surprised to see if this enhanced zone, where we see more of the storm reports coming from, is actually a little bit to the east for quite a few reasons. So far, just one wind report done by the Storm Prediction Center. These usually take a little bit of time to funnel in. So yesterday's events just resulted in some wind reports overnight. And as we go through the day, it's going to continue with these storm reports, and it just takes them time to go through them and actually list them there. But it's definitely not looking good as far as the outcome. So just be prepared. I do want to note that I have a video on how to use your radar apps in order to find rotation in the sky before there's an actual tornado on the ground. So I'll show that in just a moment. Right now, these are wind gusts. So the winds are really raging. It's going to be about 50 miles per hour sustained winds for a lot of this area where it's blue, even 60 where the blue is. So we have that's going to be strong enough to break tree limbs just with these storms alone, not even inside of a tornado. So this whole region already has the option for shingle damage, downed power lines, and all kinds of messy stuff going on today. It's going all the way up to the East Coast into Quebec with snowstorms near the Great Lakes will continue throughout the day. And as we progress here, even into tonight and starting tomorrow, there'll be a huge snowstorm for the Southeast once again. So be on guard for all of those kinds of things. Wintry mixed weather going on as people are trying to drive to work tomorrow morning. So be careful. Heed your warnings, please. I'm going to, in that case, show a video that I made. Going back here, I will show how you can find one of my videos. So if you go to youtube.com and then go to the search bar, you can type in understanding your weather apps or weather apps. I have a hard time remembering exactly the name. There it is, understanding weather apps. You can even find tornadoes. So this is a video that I created in order to show people how to use base velocity. Now, if you have an iPhone, you can use Weather Lab. I love because it gives 3D. It's the only one with 3D. And then this one here is good for Android, which is Radar Omega or Radar Scope. And this is a couplet. When you have green next to red and then those bright whites is even stronger. And a lot of these have cross-section analyses. So you can go through the storm and see its vertical. And in that case, if it's on the base velocity, which I switched to in just a moment here in this video, then you're able to see greens and red appearing as wind going in opposite directions as related to the radome, which in this case is it's always going to be like a black center. Some apps will put like a blue circle around it. But that way you can see on the base velocity too here, this one is where it's rain, and these are, and that could be hail, it could be really strong torrential downpours, or you switch to this where it's rotation in the sky here. And it looks like very strong winds. They're even stronger when you get the bright whites in most cases. You'll have to look at the, every single app has the option of making it a little different, but usually they're all following this kind of color scheme. Reds and greens are always that. So here, from this radome, we're noticing that some of this air is going one way and the other air right next to it's going this way. And that is rotation. So it's called a couplet when we are viewing it this way and we see round circles next to round circles. And then on the cross-section analyses, you're able to notice if it's touching the ground or not. In some cases, you notice that maybe it's hard to tell, but there's a little bit of a curve here. And as you get farther from the radar, and it also has to do with terrain, you'll end up missing some of this. It can go higher and higher. And let's say in some cases, there's actually no radar coverage. And then in other cases, there is like maybe a gap about 1,500 feet to the next radar. So otherwise, on this video, I do get into a little bit of another one that's harder to tell, because in this case, it's along a frontal zone. And you're able to already see greens right next to reds. So sometimes we'll see this line because if there is a cold front and the air is moving from the south one way and then it's moving from the north another way, well, then the radar is going to take that on as this air is moving one way and that's moving the opposite. But very quickly, there's a spin up in there. So you're able to catch that there's what's called a couplet still forming in there, and it's just not quite as strong. If it's a long track F5, that usually, F5 such strong wind, it's going to show up as a very bright white. It's going to be large, and you'll notice it much more than something like this, like a brief spin up of what likely there was like an F1 or 2 or EF1, let's say. Technically, it's an enhanced Fujita scale now. So I want to click back before I end this live and show Tornado HQ again. This is an experimental website. What they do here is they use radar, the base velocity that I just showed, in order to issue warnings. Whereas National Weather Service, your EAS, your emergency alert systems on a lot of our apps, they will use what's coming from the National Weather Service office. And there's people working, of course, for our government that do the weather forecasting, and they will catch on to the base velocity. They'll be watching the other radars. But at this point, people started maybe about 10, 15 years ago calling tornado warnings when there are rotations in the upper atmosphere, like I just showed you. And they don't wait until it's on the ground and the spotter sees it. So it can be a little confusing sometimes. Now, this site, I think it's best to just be prepared all the time. For instance, I haven't seen anybody issue an actual tornado warning here yet. But if I were in Europa, let's see, yes, if it's Europa, or if I was in any of the cities right directly between there and Lexington, living, in the country here or something, I would want to just take cover if it were my family, at least get my kids downstairs, and I would be on the porch looking very closely at the base velocity, knowing that there's a lag. There can be up to a 10-minute lag, and it's usually just a couple minutes. So with a trained eye like I have, I'm able to tell, like, oh, is it lagging quite a bit right now, or is this just like a 1-minute delay? And so for someone who doesn't know that kind of stuff or doesn't care to see something like that to begin with, it's best in this kind of a zone and what we call a polygon to go ahead and get into your shelter at that point. Or and really, if you're in Europa, you have time to drive away, and then you just have to be careful about where you're going, because look at all the storms that are there. So I'm saying I would want to drive away if I didn't have a storm shelter. And I know these storms are heading here now, but I know that my friend over, in this area here, or right up the highway in Granada, does have a Grenada, I think it's called there. If I knew they had a basement, then I would probably think about, going when it's not wanting to get into the red, torrential downpours, but then waiting for this little bit to pass until it's all clear, and then heading up the highway to somebody's storm shelter before the next squall or the next line of storms comes through. Because where they're deeper, brighter colors, in this case red on the radar, then that's where the stronger storms are. Larger particles in the air just indicates that there's more instability and a greater likelihood of hail and tornado and wind damage with that. So I hope everyone can stay safe today and use a little bit of what I shared to help them. If you have any questions, please go ahead and let me know in the comments. Also, go ahead and subscribe to my page. I'll do updates for global severe weather forecasting. That's all around the world that I work on for that, including a lot of long track, what I call long range hurricane forecasting there. So otherwise, I have a Weather Woman page here that you're welcome to find. This is on Facebook, facebook.com/the world of weather. So I posted about this the other day, and I notify people on here before anything's happening. If you come to my page, it's going to look like this more instead, and you can see all of the reports that I'm putting out. And I'll be going to bed soon. Got to wake up and do the morning show again here. I'm working temporarily, filling in for a lady who's on maternity leave, and just had moved to Atlanta. So there's my family. I was wishing them a happy Valentine's Day. I do miss them. They're still there, and I am here for another month. But I'm enjoying the weather that I'm getting here. It's fun to just see different things. I drove through some snow squalls the other day, and I'm putting a video together to share about that and some safety tips on driving through this kind of weather. Because on my way home, with the snow falling, it was actually totally covering the roads. And there were some periods where the visibility was cut down to 1/8 of a mile. And so I want to share with people ways that they can stay safe during that as well. And just keep people weather ready and able to enjoy it instead of being afraid of it. So I wish you all the best today through these wicked storms, and just double checking again that there's no new ones on the map right now. And that is a no. So I want to get one last look at that lightning show, and I'll go ahead and sign off here. You can see where I am working right now in the tri-state. Oh, wow. It's just incredible how this thing is coming together. Lots of Gulf moisture that's going to pull up into this frontal zone today. And just so everybody's aware, most of these storms, when we have that warning like it is embedded within all of this yellow and green, there's less chance that it's going to stay on the ground for a long time, and more chance that it could actually spin around in the upper air without ever coming down to the ground, because there's so much changing there. I mean, you can just watch this cluster of storms kind of morphing and changing. Ways that I could maybe explain that is that temperature, pressure, they work together in the ideal gas law, mathematically speaking. Like they kind of if one changes, the other one changes. And so when it's inside an environment like this, and you're seeing the change of motion so fast, that's also changing the pressures, and it's changing the temperatures really quick within it. So it's hard for any kind of rotation to really stay the same cycle over and over, because everything around it is like pulling it in different directions. And basically the atmosphere, like all natural systems, want to reach a state of equilibrium, or at least that's what they're working toward. And so all of these different parts of the storm are, in a sense, trying to become equal and evened out. And if that's the case, it's going to keep spreading and spreading. Whereas if we have a storm like what we're seeing by Hattiesburg here, heading north, if this one was able to keep growing and growing, then that could turn into more of a supercell situation. It's really only working with itself, and it's one cell altogether. So that's how we had the long track that went from Jonesboro, Arkansas, into Dawson Springs, Kentucky, and to Mayfield, Kentucky, where that almost broke the record for how long a tornado had ever been recorded on the ground, since we started keeping those records about 100 years ago. And so still the 1925 tri-state is holding that record, but that was a near quad state tornado, and it would be from a cell that is like this by itself, because then it can have its own engine per se, where there's a rear flank downdraft coming out the back end. There is inflow coming into the front end, and it just becomes its own, like kind of like an engine block, bringing in air, funneling it out one way, and it can just continue growing and growing in itself and keep that same sort of pattern going. Whereas right here, it's like you put I can't really use an engine for that example, but then it's basically just too messy to continue some kind of organized rotation, because it's being pulled in all these other directions. So stay safe, and know there could be tons of little quick spin ups here. Also downbursts coming from some of those bits of rotation that might be just really brief, that could damage some rooftops and trees. And the lightning is just so plentiful, so be careful on that. And I wish you all the best. Have a great, safe day. Enjoy the weather, and stay safe and prepared. Don't get scared. This is your weather woman meteorologist, Amy Metz.